Welcome to the Will to Power podcast. I am your host, Nick Vital. Before I begin, please do me a favor. Hit the like up button if you aren't already, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you like about this episode or what you dislike, and I will probably not try to accommodate it because I'm kind of an arrogant asshole, but still be interesting. Let's begin. Today we are talking about right-wing revolution, the prospects for a right-wing revolution, and by revolution I mean it in the classical sense, destroying the old power structures or hijacking them and taking them over for our own ends. So, I'm going to divide this into three parts. The first part is going to be about kind of redefining what right-wing means, kind of clearing that up so we're all on the same page. So what does it mean to be right-wing? What are the values of the right-wing? Those sorts of things. The next part is going to be about the right-wing critique of the modern world, kind of examining the right as an oppositional movement to power. And lastly, we're going to be looking at some of the opportunities for the right in the modern world. So I think it's very typical for people on the right to fall into the left's frame. And what I mean by this is letting the left kind of define everything. So typically you hear right-wing, left-wing, and you think that left-wing stands for progress and right-wing stands for tradition. Or left-wing stands for, anti-racism, right-wing stands for white supremacy, something of that nature. And I think that is a terrible, terrible mistake. I think the right gives up a lot of ground by positioning itself as a defensive and conservative movement, trying to hold on to the past or kind of recreate the past. The truth is, the world is always changing. And if your position is no, the world shouldn't change, then, well, you don't really have a seat at the table in terms of discussing which direction the world should change in. So, I think it's a terrible idea to let the left wing define things, define what the left-right dichotomy means, so I'm going to correct that mistake right now. So this is admittedly very different from what typically gets described as left and right wing, not only how the left describes it, but also many people among the right. So, for me, right wing is based in adaptive virtues. And what I mean by this is those sorts of habitualized actions turned into character that lead to societal and individual thriving. These typically fall within a mean, right? So a good example of this would be physical fitness is a golden mean. That's an adaptive virtue. It kind of lies between a sedentary lifestyle of physical inactivity and overexertion. Somebody who is obsessed with working out, runs a marathon 3 times a week. Now, both of those extremes are pretty degradative to the body. They're not adaptive. The mean, the prizing of health, the prizing of, physical fitness, activity, things like that, that is a virtue. So, when I talk about the right, it's strongly based in the virtue ethics, of the ethics of action, and specifically adaptive action, right? Things that actually improve your life or improve society as a whole. Now, the second aspect of right-wing politics, and I think this is key. If I were to say right-wing politics is one thing, it's this. Or the left-right dichotomy is one thing, then it's this. The left wing valorizes equality. They see equality as a virtue. The right wing, on the other hand, sees distinction as a virtue. The reality is that equality is a public vice, right? There's very few notable societies, there's none actually, that are egalitarian, right? If you think about an egalitarian society, well, what's the most egalitarian society you can think of? It's like the Bantu village in the Congo rainforest, or the Aboriginal Australians who have lived in caves for 100,000 years. So these are egalitarian societies, very undeveloped, very maladaptive when faced with hierarchical technological societies. So the right wing essentially stands for the respect of distinction, right? It's very adaptive to make distinctions, right? To distinguish between even good and bad, poor and good quality, mediocrity and greatness. You can't really even make these value judgments if you think that equality is the end-all be-all of virtue. So the right, on the other hand, prizes distinction and prizes greatness, right? The right wing wants to create a society which facilitates the development of individual greatness. Whereas the left wing, they prize equality of outcome. Everybody's a gray Bugman. So that's a good recasting of what the right-left political dichotomy is. Left, egalitarian, gay, lame, losers. Right wing, distinction, greatness, virtue as something that you actually have to do and live up to rather than just a vapid opinion. So the next aspect of right-wing ideology is this notion that struggle is good. And this is, again, contrasted to the left. Because what do you have amongst the left? You have a bunch of people, if you can call them that, biomass, if you will, who their whole ideology is making life comfortable, right? It's quote-unquote harm reduction. And they have this harebrained idea that if you just make life easy for people, then everything else will work out. They'll be happy, they'll be fulfilled, they'll do what they want to, and they'll just create a better world. Now, this is a very naive assumption, right? In reality, things are only worth doing if they're difficult, right? We don't get meaning and satisfaction from an easy life. You get people like Hunter Biden from an easy life. And this is exactly the problem of the left, or the problem of the West, right? The West is a society and culture suffering from rich kid syndrome writ large. And I know the left likes to play like, oh, everybody's so oppressed, all these systems of oppression. But the reality is the people in the West are the most spoiled people in history, right? Probably especially second-generation immigrants, right? Because they're contrasted with their austere parents. You get the Mexican who moves over, had this rough life their whole life. They move to the United States. They either have a kid or bring their 4-year-old kid. The kid grows up in this opulence of the United States and wonders why their parents are so austere. So their kids become the worst deviants possible. In any case, I digress. So among the right, there is this notion that you only really get positive development through struggle. It's through facing adversity, through overcoming challenge that you become better. Now, obviously, this is kind of a novel idea in the right. This isn't exactly the consensus among the right, but according to me, this is what right-wing politics is. It's the valorization of development through struggle, right? You don't get muscles by taking it easy. You don't develop a nice body by just lounging about. You got to go for the jog. You got to hit the weights. You have to actually face stressors, and that's how you overcome. And this applies to society at large and life at large, right? It's not fun to learn a new skill for very few, maybe sometimes it is. You get really into something and it's fun. For most of the time, it's like, even learning to something like reading, right? Most kids don't naturally learn to read very easily. It's a struggle. But again, it makes them a better person. Now, if you were to take the left-wing society where just kind of everybody magically self-develops, through it, in the context of a life of ease, it's a fantasy. It's an absolute fantasy. And those sorts of ideas breed mediocre people, as you see amongst the left, right? There's not too many outstanding people among the left. You get people like Vosh. So let's continue. The last big value of the right, we've already talked about adaptive virtue. We've already talked about distinction. We've talked about development through struggle. Now, the last big value that distinguishes the right is its notion and its valorization of expansion. You know, the right preferences a kind of life of vigor and expansion, a drive towards exploration. You know, this kind of go out there and make a name for yourself, go out there and create a life for yourself. Whereas the left is, you know, everything's handed to you. Here's this prefab life. You work here, you drink your coffee here, you go home to a place that looks like this. Be happy. You know, that's the left. Whereas the right, you know, it does kind of have this pioneer spirit, right? This notion that you should go out and face the unknown, that you should go out and conquer unclaimed territory. It's a very rightist value. Now, all of this adds up, though. All of this adds up that right-wing values aren't simply a set of opinions or a set of ideas, but it also implies that there is a necessity of action, that there's a necessity of character, right? If you're on the left, you can get away with the lip service, right? It's like, oh yeah, Black Lives Matter, burn America to the ground. You know, you can kind of get away with that kind of gay sloganeering, and then you're seen as virtuous, right? As long as you hate white people enough, then you're on the right side. With right-wing politics, on the other hand, and if you're talking about things like adaptive virtues, you know, it's a little bit sus whenever you get like a 20-year-old quote-unquote right-winger who's fat or disheveled or dirty, something of that nature, who just doesn't live up to the values, doesn't live up to the virtues, and has no good excuse. You know, and I'm not saying everybody has to do everything all at once. You know, there's definitely truth to the notion that you have to focus on things. If you're at a point in your life where you're focused on making money or your education or learning, particularly difficult skills, yeah, it might not make sense to spend 4 hours a week in a gym. But at the same time, like, you better be doing something. The right wing is not a playground of people who just talk. Unfortunately, it is. There's a lot of LARPers and there's a lot of like cringy fucking tradcons, 17-year-old tradcons. But the right wing should be a kind of politics of action, a politics of virtue. So that is my definition of right wing, and obviously it's very different from, you know, the caricature that's presented in critical race theory, where it's like, oh, right-winger people just, you know, they're just traditional assholes who hate black people and think white people are the best. Nothing like that at all. I think white people are cucks, personally, or, you know, one giant race of cucks. But for me, right-wing politics is the virtues itself. You know, it is the strength, it is the intelligence, the creativity, the drive towards expansion, the courageousness, the willingness to face the unknown. So that is right-wing politics, as contrasted to left-wing politics, which is, you know, gay egalitarianism. You know, we just all gotta strive towards equality of outcomes. You know, I get maximum freedom to be a degenerate plus the Gibbs. You know, I want to be state subsidized to be a diddler or something like that. So let's continue. Let's talk about next. We're going to go into the right-wing critique of the modern world. And this is huge, because if we don't have this, we don't have anything. Now again, normally the left wing tries to paint right-wing politics as defenders of the status quo, right? Trying to hold on to power. I think, again, we need to reject the framing of the left, right? We can't just kind of accept the terms that the left hands us and try to struggle from there. Instead, the right wing needs to position itself as an oppositional movement to power as it exists today in the world. And specifically, the gay globo homo power that we all have to suffer through today. So, in terms of the right-wing critique of the modern world, a lot of it comes down to the closing off of space, right? There's less room to explore. There's less room to, struggle. There's less opportunity to make yourself into somebody. Again, instead it's this globo homo prefab world where it's like, well, you're going to do this. You're going to be the fucking office worker or the burger flipper or, you're going to be the marketeer or some bullshit like that. Very, very gay. So the closing off of space, the reduction of opportunities to strive for your own greatness and development through struggle. It's all prefab now. The next major critique of the modern world is there's simply this kind of lame homogenization, right? Everywhere is becoming the same. You hear these fucking cringy-ass digital nomad types, right? Bragging about traveling around. The reality is these people work at different fucking Starbucks, right? It's like, I'm going to go to Mexico City and work at the Starbucks. Oh, this week I'm in Medellin and working at the Starbucks. Next week I'll be in Bangkok working at the Starbucks. It's fucking gay, right? So even these digital nomad types, even though they front like they have, this explorer lifestyle, in reality most of these guys are cucks too. So the homogenization of the globe under this kind of overarching secular system. And I just put out a blog post about this. I'll probably link it in the description, so check that out. The next major critique of the modern world by the right is of the class structure itself. We have this gay fake elite, the globo homo elite, who are essentially resentful nerds who, they occupied that space in history, right, where they were bullied but not bullied enough. Right? They develop the resentfulness towards the bullies, and one day I'll get back at them. I'll become smart, and I'll, become rich, and then I'll have my way. This is, the mindset of the Faucis of the world. So we have this gay globo homo elite it's bound and determined to turn us all into kind of slaves without a clear master, right? We're kind of slaves under this overarching social economic system that we have to live up to and answer to. And if we don't, of course, we'll be excommunicated. We'll be, driven off platforms or put on no-fly lists or something of this nature. So it's this kind of mammy safety state, right? It's the passive-aggressive mammy state, which pretends like it's nice, pretends like it's caring and empathetic and egalitarian, but in reality they have all the power, right? They'll just turn off your services. Oh, no bank account. No ability to travel, no ability to buy anything online. And that's the kind of force that is applied by this gay globo homo elite, for the most part. That's they don't really, the secret police isn't coming to your house and grabbing you in the middle of the night and shooting you or anything like that. Instead, it's, we'll ruin your reputation. We'll make it so that you can't access key services that everybody else can access. You won't be able to fly. Everybody else can. So that's part of the critique of the modern world. So the right wing is definitely against all of that, right? We want to preserve spaces to explore. We want to preserve opportunities to grow and develop through struggle. We want to preserve the distinctiveness of places, right? We don't need to turn everywhere into a fucking tourist trap. We don't really want to see Starbucks and McDonald's everywhere. We actually, enjoy local cultures. We have this notion of, elites actually should be elite, right? They should have elite virtues. They should have qualities that make them stand out, not simply they have a lot of money and control over media, control over technology. So next, we've talked about the virtues of the right. We've talked about a little bit of our critique of the modern world, who we see as the enemy, who we see as what are we fighting against, so to speak. And most importantly, we're going to talk about the opportunities for the right wing. So that's all well and good, but we need to talk about opportunities for the right. And this is hugely important because there are huge opportunities. Now, a lot of this stems down to the fact that there is, at this moment, a huge crisis in confidence and credibility for the establishment. Right? They've been going out on this weird limb on this COVID shit, where it's, vaccine passports and lock everybody down except for the people who are rioting about St. Floyd. And it's turned off a lot of people, and especially in the last few months now, we're talking about booster shots and this bullshit. So there's been a lot of people who are disaffected from this fucking street peddler motherfucker. Sorry about the street peddler. I don't live in Beverly Hills, my bad. I'm not Vosh and like Hazan. I don't live in California. Now, in any case, so you have a lot of people disaffected from the current system. They see the kind of inconsistencies, they see the hypocrisy, they see it kind of fucking with their money, right? People hate that when you fuck with their money. So on the ground, there's already a lot of kind of discontent with the existing system, and there's this crisis of credibility where people are losing faith in the institutions. The institutions have no way to deal with this except for trying to crack down on those expressing disbelief and skepticism, which in turn fuels more disbelief and skepticism. And it's one of those cases where, there's this saying that you can't be half a gangsta. You have to go one way or the other. You can't just kind of fucking dabble. You can't just kind of play the middle ground sometimes. And the establishment is kind of stuck in this hard place where they can't just let quote-unquote misinformation, anything that challenges their credibility, run wild. And they can't necessarily crack down fully, right? They can't just start arresting people for thought crimes. So they're trying to do this weird half measure where they're like, okay, we're going to suppress things. We're going to cancel people. We're going to deplatform people. We're going to fact check. But this in turn only creates more skepticism, and it creates more discredit for the establishment. So this has been huge, right? You have like kind of an increasing distrust of establishment media, establishment institutions, educational institutions, these sorts of things. This collapse of a confidence. And what we need to do is we need to associate it as much as possible with left-wing politics. We need to reframe, right? The left has done a good job over the past 60 years of framing themselves as, we're for equality, we're for progressivism, we're for tolerance, blah, 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 blah. And we need to reframe it, no, you're really for this gay globo-homo state that, their version of equality is we're all just kind of peasants, who are lorded over by technocrats. So we need to reframe things as much as possible to associate it with the left, right? Or to associate the left with these corrupt kind of bureaucratic, mammy state institutions that people are, increasingly hating. But we need to do a few things for this. This isn't going to come naturally necessarily. It does to some extent, right? Like, there's plenty of boomers calling Joe Biden a communist and whatnot. But we need to do a better job of getting to the root of what is leftism and what's going on, because we do have, on one hand, the culture of leftism, this kind of culture of, the vapid morality of proclaiming your support for this XY cause and, your opposition to white supremacy and whatnot, versus the kind of, I lost my train of thought there. So we essentially, I'm going to start over. But this won't come altogether by itself, right? There's definitely boomers out there who are calling Joe Biden a communist and stuff like that. But we need to do a better job of tying it to this really counterposing this naive preference for equality to our own values of greatness and distinction. and really tie that kind of vapid morality of equality to the gay globo homo state that's developing, the bureaucratic hellhole that's, devouring everything. But to do that, we kind of have to distance ourselves from a few poor trends, right? Like libertarianism is an obvious one. On one hand, like, it's just not feasible. No country is going to be this libertarian utopia fantasy. They're just going to simply get run shot over. That by any country with, a combination of state investments into high technology, essentially. So libertarianism, off the table. And I would say, tread lightly on all these people, right? We can still win them over, specifically with libertarianism. There's a lot of men out there who have a libertarian spirit, who enjoy the ability to philander and kind of be men, who oppose the globo homo because it inhibits that. These are people who tend towards the libertine lifestyle, who are made enemies of the globo homo by the globo homo's own, rotten willingness to interfere in fun everywhere. So we need to figure out ways to get these people on our side, is what I'm saying. Even though we need to ditch it as central political, factors. So libertarianism is one of those. The other thing we need to ditch is white nationalism. Obviously, I talk about this all the time. I'm going to go into this more right now, because all identities are kind of bullshit, right? People kind of get into these debates about, what is a real American and what is really white, and they'll pick out this point of history. It's like, 1820s, that's when that's when the Eastern Europeans started coming over and fucking up the Anglos, or some bullshit like that. But the point being is, at any point in history, what you're describing is like, that was white. At that time, that was an emergent identity. It was new at the time. So the same thing, we need to start creating kind of new identities that's not just, this is white, or, this is Western, this is American. So we need to ditch the quasi-retarded white nationalism. Same thing with tradconism. We're never going to preserve anything. Things are always changing. We need to be part of that discourse about which direction change should go. And it's fine to have personal beliefs, right? Like, I'm not sucking anybody's dick, right? Like, and I am a Christian. I do believe in God, but at the same time, I'm not like, this is what it means to be right wing, is that you believe in God and you don't suck dicks if you're a dude. It's just, that's a fucking gay low bar for what it means to be right wing, first of all. And it's just not gonna go anywhere in today's society. It's retrogressive, right? It's trying to turn back time rather than dictate the direction of current change. So I hope that made sense to some of you 90 IQ fucking LARPers out there. So develop a new identity. In order for these opportunities to come to fruition too, we have to have smart strategies, right? We have to, again, not LARP online all the time. And I've gone into this before, right? I just posted a video about using left-wing tactics against the left. So we need to explore some of that. We need to actually have smart strategies, building institutions that are capitalizing on this collapse of confidence and trust for mainstream institutions. So that's essentially it. The right-wing revolution, a kind of revolution of values within the right, kind of moving away from tradconism and white identity politics towards something that's actually traditional, right? Adaptive virtue, Homeric virtue, that's kind of traditional within the West. But in any case, adaptive virtue, a virtue, an ethics of action, an ethics of character, an ethics of doing things that improve people. Similarly, the value of distinction, right? The value of distinguishing what is great from what is not. This is this is something that we need to expound upon. We need to be able to clearly delineate our virtues and how it's separated from what is not virtuous, and make that itself a political point, because the left is all mud, right? It's like, healthy at all size. It's just fucking nonsense, right? At this point, men or women, I'm not even gonna go into all their crazy ideas, because I don't want that gayness to escape my mouth. But we need to make it very clear that right wing means a valorization of distinction, a respect for distinction, and through that, a respect of greatness, right? A development of greatness. Similarly, positioning the right as a political ideology that prizes struggle as a means to develop oneself, to develop one's society. And finally, right-wing as a kind of ideology which prizes the notion of expansion, of exploration, of challenging societal and geographic, spiritual frontiers, technological frontiers, those sorts of things. This is a very futurist notion of right-wing. This isn't 17-year-olds LARPing about how they want to have families or some bullshit like that. The next part of this revolution, this right-wing revolution, is right-wing as an oppositional force. It's not the right wing that's merely the defense of power. It's not the cuck-conservative, the neocon. It's right-wing as a clear critique of modernity, of the globo homo, of the gay elite. So right-wing as the center of an oppositional force to power as it exists in a rotten way today. And finally, the revolution, the right-wing revolution, is kind of recognizing those opportunities, recognizing that we are entering into and experiencing a kind of crisis for ruling institutions, a collapse of confidence and trust, and making the most of that. So hopefully, seeing what happens, but we have to be able on the move. We can't just rely on things to collapse, right? That's a very rosy, millenarian perspective. It's like, oh, shit will just get so bad and it will just collapse, and then there'll be the race war, and then whites will get their ethno state. That's a fucking fantasy, quite honestly. It could happen, but that's a very rosy sort of fantasy where everything kind of works out. It could work out much worse. It could be, the globo homo state solidifies and you're on a social credit score sort of thing. You can't ride a train. You can't talk on Telegram because you've been bad. So in any case, recognizing the opportunities for the right, kind of capitalizing on that confidence and trust, collapse of confidence and trust that the ruling institutions are currently facing, associating that with the left in order to grow the right, and growing the right in a specific way as an oppositional force, which has distinct characteristics and values from the left. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you think that a right-wing revolution is possible or necessary, please leave a comment, subscribe, hit the like button, and share this. Until next time, peace.